What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have quite a bit of volleyball to get into. As been a quiet week of NCAA Women's Volleyball Week 11. But we did have a couple big upsets, such as Miami, the U, downing number 10 Georgia Tech. How did the Hurricanes blow right through the Yellow Jackets? And how about Oregon, quack, taking down Washington at Matthew Knight Arena? Can the Ducks continue their hot streak? And are they a very good home team? And how about Sierra Canyon taking down Mira Costa? No, not just taking them down, sweeping Mira Costa in the CIF Southern Section playoffs. And Vista Murrieta also broke through and defeated Alicia Miguel in the Division II CIF Southern Section final. We have a little bit of NCAA men's volleyball to discuss as well, so hand me a volleyball, set the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. I hope you all are having a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Tuesday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made it into episode 167 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball action. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform. IE Sports Radio, it can be followed on Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at IE Sports Radio, and on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, then Radio. You could also go to the website of IE Sports Radio, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go there, you'll see a Patreon link at the top, which starts out at $5 a month. This will get you a shout out from all of our shows, including this one, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans. With your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Marcus Low's Great, Key to the Gate, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous. Now, without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball action. So we're going to start off with some NCAA men's volleyball, because at first I thought there was not going to be any NCAA men's volleyball to discuss, but then I realized Long Beach State has released its schedule for the 2023 season. Okay, it's not that dramatic, but Long Beach State has released its schedule for this upcoming season, and it's sure to be quite the barn burner season. So they open up the season on January 13th. So normally NCAA men's volleyball teams open up the season on the first week of January, which would most likely be on in this case, it would be the 3rd of January, which would be a Tuesday. If not, it would be on like a Friday, Thursday, or Saturday. But in Long Beach State's case, they open up the season in the second week of January as they play King. Yes, King from, I want to say it's from the Coastal Carolinas. Either way, they play King on January 13th, and then they follow that up with a matchup against Lindenwood on January 14th. Both of the games are going to be home, by the way. Then on January 20th and 21st, they actually head down. They hit the road. They take on Long Island on January 20th, and then they play George Mason on January 21st. They actually are playing, I guess they're playing at the George Mason tournament, which is cool, I guess. And it's kind of an interesting matchup right there. I mean, it's an okay matchup. I mean, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's an easy schedule, but because nothing is really guaranteed. But before they play King, they actually have a number of, I think they have scrimmages against McMaster from Tuesday all the way to Friday, according to their schedule online. Then they have the George Mason tournament following their matchups against King and Lindenwood. Then after the George Mason tournament, they hit the road to University Park to play Penn State. So that's going to be a very good matchup because last year Penn State beat Long Beach State on its home floor last season, and then Penn State returns quite a number of players from last year. And Penn State's got some unfinished business to attend to after it fell in the EIVA conference tournament semifinals. Following the matchup against Penn State, they have a little bit of a week off before their next matchup, Friday, February 3rd, when they play Loyola of Chicago. That should be an interesting matchup. It should be a decent matchup. Loyola's head coach does return home, and I think, home to Southern California, and I think Loyola always presents a good challenge. And then the following week, Thursday, February 9th, and Friday, February 10th, Long Beach State, as I alluded to last week, plays UCLA. The Thursday matchup, they're at UCLA, and then the Friday matchup, they're home against UCLA. I plan to be in attendance for that home matchup for Long Beach State. And then the following week, Long Beach State welcomes NJIT on back-to-back nights on Friday, February 17th and Saturday, February 18th. That's kind of interesting that they're playing NJIT twice. I didn't think that would be possible, but there it is. I understand them playing NJIT one time, but playing them twice? That must be a somewhat of a Danny Goncalves thing, trying to schedule some really good competition. And Long Beach doesn't really get the EIVA competition that they normally get. And NJIT is a fairly decent team. And they're not going to play Princeton from what I'm seeing. Just a spoiler alert. Then on February 24th, Long Beach State also remains at home to take on Concordia of Irvine. So the Eagles have kind of been a little, I wouldn't say not too up, but not too down either. Obviously, they're going to have to deal with life without Jordan Hoppe. But I think Concordia could be somewhat of a challenge, but not compared to this next matchup, though. So the following week, Long Beach State closes out its first part of non-conference play. Notice how I said the word first part. Remember this for next time. Remember this as we go along. So, Long Beach State closes out the first part of their non-conference schedule as they play Ball State, which will be on March 3rd. Now, that's going to be a very good matchup. Ball State, obviously, they're a very good team. They should return a majority of their team from last year, and they were an NCAA Final Four. They were a part of the NCAA Final Four. So I really think that's going to be a great matchup between the up-and-coming Ball State taking on the big boy Long Beach State. Then Long Beach State kicks off Big West Conference play against UC Santa Barbara on March 10th and March 11th. The matchup will be at Santa Barbara the first go-around, and then the second go-around will be at Long Beach. Then Long Beach State goes out of the frying pan with one really talented Big West team, and then goes into the frying pan with another as they hit the road to Honolulu to take on Hawaii on March 17th and March 18th, which that's going to be a very good matchup. You know, Hawaii, obviously, it's a rematch of last year's NCAA Men's Volleyball Championship, and it's a rematch of last year's Big West Conference Tournament Final, both of which Hawaii won in 5 sets, and this is going to be a very good Hawaii team. So Long Beach State better bring its A game, but I'm sure they will. Then Long Beach State takes a break from the Big West Conference play. So in Big West Conference, or in the Big West Conference, I'm pretty sure that at least one team, or there's a 1 week where there will be a bye week. So for Long Beach State's case, they will have their bye week on March 24th and the week of March 24th, where they'll play USC at the Pyramid, and then they'll also play them the day after. So they have a two game set against USC. March 24th is at home, and then March 25th, being a Saturday, it's at USC. Then on March 31st and April 1st, Long Beach State plays UC San Diego. They'll be away for the first matchup, and then they'll return home for the second matchup. Bradley Rostratter, I wouldn't say will return home because his true home was in Orange County, but he does get to taste what Alan Knipe and the Beach has in store for them. Then the following week, Long Beach State is at CSUN on April 7th, and then at home against CSUN on April 8th. And then they close out the regular season against UC Irvine on April 14th, a Friday, and then April 15th, a Saturday. And then they also have the Big West Conference Tournament, which I don't know if I told you all this, but the Big West Conference Tournament is actually going to be in Irvine this year. I'm pretty sure I did, though. And it's going to be the week of April 20th all the way through the 22nd. And I actually just got word from the man, the myth, the legend himself, Nick England, that there will not be any NVA events scheduled on the week of the Big West Conference Tournament. So I will be in attendance for all of the days of the Big West Conference Men's Volleyball Tournament. Okay, it's not that impressive, but just wanted to throw that out there. I will be at UC Irvine the entire week of the Big West Conference Tournament. It's definitely going to be fun, and I'm glad it's going to be in Irvine. I think that's the most, what's the word to use? The most manageable place I could attend the Big West Conference Tournament. I mean, definitely, Hawaii is just out of my reach unless I'm made of money. And then CSUN's a little bit too long. CSUN and San Diego, as well as Santa Barbara, are a little too out of my range. So Long Beach and Irvine are definitely the ones for me, and I'm glad it's going to be in Irvine. So I'm excited to see what Long Beach State has to offer, and I'm really excited to see what the Big West Conference has in store for everybody. I seriously cannot wait to see when Hawaii releases their schedule. I'm sure we've seen multiple leaks of them playing UCLA and when their matchup against Long Beach State is going to be. It's going to be quite the season for the Big West Conference, and I don't think there's going to be any easy matches when it comes to any of these teams. It's not just going to be Long Beach State and Hawaii. Well, obviously it's going to be Long Beach State and Hawaii at the top, but then you've got Santa Barbara, which is fairly decent. Irvine is vastly improved. UC San Diego might have some talent on their team. And then CSUN returns a good portion of their talent. That team is always scrappy. But overall, I think for Long Beach State, even though, remember, this is a team that lost Alex Nikolov. This is a team that returns everybody on their team except for Nikolov. But this Long Beach State team is going to be very fun to watch. And if you saw them last week, not this past weekend, but the previous weekend when they played Pepperdine in their scrimmage, they looked sharp as ever. Obviously, the first scrimmage didn't really do them any justice just because it was kind of the second unit, if not third unit. But their first unit looked on point after that first set. So Long Beach State is going to be definitely a team to watch for. So that is pretty much that when it comes to NCAA men's volleyball. There was the scrimmage. I said this on Twitter that there was going to be a scrimmage between Pepperdine and Hawaii, as Hawaii made its second road trip down to California to take on Pepperdine on last Friday, and then they also played Santa Barbara on this past Saturday. So that is pretty much that. I didn't go to either of those, and you're probably wondering, and I guess I should probably mention this. I did not attend. I didn't attend those matches, and for the reason being, I was on vacation. So this past weekend I was on vacation. I tried to see some of the volleyball action, but it was tough because of the Wi-Fi signal and not being at certain matches. So, unfortunately, that was a tough loss for me. But I would have liked to have seen the Hawaii Pepperdine scrimmage just to get a better look on how Pepperdine looks and how Santa Barbara looks. I mean, obviously I've seen Pepperdine play, but I want to see Santa Barbara. I want to get a good look of all of these teams before the season starts, just so I'm ahead of the game. So that is pretty much that for the NCAA men's volleyball portion of the show. Let's jump to some high school girls volleyball. So, in terms of the CIF Southern Section playoffs, we'll start with Division II. So, the Division II finals, we had Alicia Nagel taking on Vista Marietta at Cerritos College. Again, I was away in Cabo San Lucas and Ensenada on a cruise, so I was unable to attend this matchup, but Vista Marietta was able to break through and win its first ever CIF Southern Section Championship as they defeated Alicia Nagel in 4 sets. Alicia Nagel unfortunately got denied a chance to win their second straight CIF Southern Section Division II championship, but that was in big part of Claire Little having herself quite the big game. I mean, Alicia Nagel slowed her down in the first set, but then after that she picked it up really good, and there was hardly anything Alicia Nagel could do, and it wasn't just Claire Little; it was other players. But for Alicia Nagel, they were led by Madison Smith, who had 18 kills, while I'm trying to pronounce this girl's first and last name right. Nicole Feliciano had 17 kills, so she wasn't too far in terms of kills for the Wolverines. And then I basically just followed the whole match on Twitter, which again, it just doesn't have that same vibe. But overall, I imagine it was a great matchup between both Alicia Nagel and Vista Marietta. I'm trying to pull up the stats for the Broncos. But overall, the match was played at Cerritos College, which it's good to see Cerritos College back to having some CIF Southern Section girls volleyball and volleyball in general finals, which I think is good. I really think it's great to see just because Cerritos College did not have it. They didn't have the finals at Cerritos College. It was either at certain sites, like for example, the Division 2 through 9 finals were at home sites, which I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, but it's not really fair for the other team, especially if they have to travel super far. But overall, it was definitely a great finals matchup between the Broncos and the Wolverines. A part of me actually wanted it to go 5, but overall, it was what it was. I'm not overly surprised to see the Broncos coming out on top. And for me, I think it's a great match. It's great to see Claire Little going out on top. I mean, she's still at the CIF state playoffs, which I'll be getting into in a little bit. But overall, for Claire Little, she had 33 kills, according to Daryl Trujillo, as well as his buddy Eric Paul Johnson. So overall, that's basically how Vista Marietta won. They had other key kill contributors, but overall, here's the little recap from My Valley News, which covers the Inland Empire and all these other things. So the set scores were were 25-19, 29-31, 25-18, and 25-21. So, yeah, and here's the crazy thing about Claire Little. She had 33 kills on 84 attempts, but she only had one hitting error, which was definitely something impressive to watch for. So BYU fans, you're getting a good player in Claire Little. And it wasn't just Claire Little that stepped up. They had other players. Stepping up, as well as they had one player have 13 kills, and then they had another player had 10 kills with 2 blocks and 4 block assists, which I thought is impressive. So overall, it wasn't just the Claire Little show. Lauren Lee had 13 kills, which I thought they need to have that number too. They need to have that second pin hitter to contribute as well. And then Liliana Montes obviously came up big for the Broncos in the not only on the offensive side but the defensive side as well. So overall for Vista Marietta, it was just a great balanced attack overall, and they got some good serves in as well. And that's basically how Vista Marietta won. Both of these teams do return to the state playoffs, as Elisa Nagel did get the number 5 seed in the Division 1 bracket, while Vista Marietta got the number 4 seed. Basically, that starts tonight as of this recording. This is being recorded on Tuesday, November 8th, which is basically the start of round 1. So that's basically it for the Division 2 finals. Now, the Division 1 final in the southern section between between Sierra Canyon and Mira Costa. Oh, baby. That was a doozy right there. That was quite the humdinger / barn burner. It didn't look like it based on the number of sets won, but it was a great matchup. Sierra Canyon actually wound up sweeping Mira Costa. Yes, I am not kidding you. They swept Mira Costa, the number 1 seed. This was the battle of the 1 seed versus the 2 seed, which isn't surprising. Again, it's not overly surprising that Sierra Canyon wound up winning, but it's just downright impressive. Like, Sierra Canyon has some darn good players. Like, the first set, let me just tell you about the match. The first set was just so back and forth. It was like a ping pong battle, back and forth, back and forth. I wasn't at the game again. I wasn't at the match, but I would not be surprised if neither team led by more than 1 point all the way up to the climax of the end of the first set. Sierra Canyon eventually took that first set 28-26. That, I think, set the tone. If they don't win that first set, Mira Costa's feeling good about themselves going into that second set. Second set, it was a little bit more not so back and forth-ish. I mean, Sierra Canyon had the lead, and then Mira Costa came back to pull within striking distance. Then Sierra Canyon had the lead, pushed further ahead. Mira Costa came back within striking distance. But eventually, Sierra Canyon won the second set 25-23. Then the third set, Sierra Canyon was taking full charge, riding the momentum from those first 2 sets. I will give credit to Mira Costa. They made it very interesting down the stretch. They were down, I think, 24-21, I want to say. But they eventually got to within 1 point. But then eventually Sierra Canyon shut the door as they got the match-clinching kill to give them the third set 25-23 and the match over Mira Costa. So this is Sierra Canyon's first ever CIF Southern Section Division 1 championship. They've won other CIF Southern Section championships in the past. I want to say they won one in Division 4 and Division 3 in terms of the Southern Section. But then they finally got brought up to Division 1, and after a few years of hardships in terms of losing in the Division 1 playoffs, they finally stand atop the mountain, and it's downright impressive. Olivia Babcock, who is a Pitt commit, finished the match with 22 kills, which that was very impressive. 22 kills in just a 3-set match. You can't ask for a better night than that. And again, this was their first CIF Southern Section Championship since 2017 when it won it in Division 3. The first one came in 2016 when it won it in Division 4. So that is entirely true. And this was actually the third meeting between the two teams. The two teams actually faced one another in Hawaii, but that was in the best of 3 format. In best of 3 format, it's so much more different than best of 5, obviously with the number of sets being played, but if you lose one set, you're basically on the opposing team is basically on the heels. And for Sierra Canyon, it didn't really do them justice that they lost to Miracosta in the finals of the ANCANG tournament, as basically they weren't bad in the finals, but Miracosta just had their way. But this time, Sierra Canyon was just the better team, and you have to tip your hat to Sierra Canyon. They played such a darn good game. Jada Sion also added 11 kills, and then Danica Rock had 8 kills and 3 blocks. Lauren Lynch had 17 digs, and Said Ilawoli totaled 43 assists. So overall for Sierra Canyon, the best part is about their season is that they're not done yet. They still have the CIF state playoffs, as that begins. Well, they're in the open division, so they're basically in a higher division than Division 1. They're in the open division, and that kicks off play on Wednesday. As of this recording, this is being recorded on Tuesday, November 8th, whereas that'll be tomorrow. And Sierra Canyon is the number 2 seed. They'll play their league rival Marymount in the first round. And I think that's a little bit of a trap game for Sierra Canyon. I think Sierra Canyon could have a little bit of trouble with that. They have beaten Marymount 2 out of 3 times, but it's against a league rival, and basically it's one of those inner city rivalries where all bets are off. So for me, I really think that could go either way when it comes to those two teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if that match went 5, but I think Sierra Canyon's riding a lot of momentum, especially with players like Sion and Babcock. That's going to be a tough duo to stop, and adding Rock just really makes them 10 times better. And I gotta give it up to Stephanie Wigfall, and I gotta basically eat my crow. I said I wasn't going to be surprised if Sierra Canyon won, but I picked Miracosta to win, and I am surprised they lost in 3, but it was a close 3 sets. So overall for Miracosta, it's not a bad loss, and their season continues as they play in the CIF state playoffs. But for them, I feel they left so much meat on the bone when it came to this matchup. I really thought they would have at least taken a set off of Sierra Canyon. But again, Sierra Canyon is just such a good team. But so is Miracosta. They have some darn good studs. As Miracosta head coach Cam Green said, it was disappointed, heartbreak for the girls because of how hard they worked. And he even said it himself. They lost to the better team. But unfortunately for Miracosta, they wound up losing in straight sets. But again, it was a very close. All of the sets were close. They were decided by 2 points. And credit to the Mustangs. If they take that first set, it's a whole different ball game. Drew Wright led Miracosta with 16 kills, but unfortunately, Miracosta just could not stop Olivia Babcock. She is just that good. And then in the second set, I also need to mention, Miracosta trailed 24-20. 95% of the teams down 24-20 to the number 2 seed in the biggest stage of the season would just straight up fold. Not Miracosta. They wound up winning the next 3 points until, I hate to say this, Miracosta missed a serve when Sierra Canyon was up 24-23, and that gave Sierra Canyon the set 25-23. And then the third set, like I said, it was actually tied 22-22, so my mistake. Tied 22-22, Sierra Canyon won the next 2 points. Miracosta staved off a championship point, but unfortunately for Miracosta, they wound up losing that. They wound up losing the set 25-23, and I think this team has a lot more potential than that match dictated. Like, it's not their fault they lost. Obviously, they ran into a red-hot Sierra Canyon team, but again, I still think they left some meat on the bone. So Miracosta, in addition to Sierra Canyon, also qualified for the CIF state playoffs. They too are in the open division. They kick off the playoffs tomorrow as of this recording. This is being recorded on November 8th, 2022 on a Tuesday. They will kick off against Newport Harbor, and this will be at Miracosta. So, for that matchup, it's so tough to judge this matchup. I mean, Newport Harbor has been all over the place. That's not just me saying that just because I've covered them a lot, but I feel that could be a big trap game, because Miracosta is coming off of a tough sweep in the finals, and then Newport Harbor, obviously, they haven't been playing too bad. Remember, this is a team that snuck into the Division I Southern Section playoffs and went 2-1 in pool play, and that's pretty darn impressive for a team that wasn't even featured on the watch list this upcoming season. So for Miracosta, I feel their work is a little cut out, but their athleticism might be what gives them the edge in this matchup. I mean, Newport Harbor has the scrappiness, but for Miracosta, in order for them to get back on track, they got to flush this loss away and then just move on to Newport Harbor. Otherwise, there'll be a first-round CIF state playoff exit. And then I guess I might as well go over the other CIF state playoff matchups in the Open Division. So in the Open Division, we have Cathedral Catholic taking on Lakewood. Now, I already told you all about Cathedral Catholic. This is a team that has not lost a match and that has not lost a set at all this season. It's that crazy. They're that good. I think her name is Julia Blishnov. She is a beast. She's going to Stanford. Cathedral Catholic, if they play their cards right, they could be on the path to finishing everything undefeated. We already saw Marymount finishing undefeated last season, but this time, if we see Cathedral Catholic doing so without losing a set, I might have to do some research and see if that has ever happened before, especially in the 25 in the modern day set scoring era to like 25 points in sets 1 through 4, and then fifth set is basically to 15. Because remember, back in the old days, we had volleyball had set scoring to 15, and you could only score on when you serve the ball. So that's basically how volleyball was back in the olden days. In order to score, you basically had to serve and then eventually get the point yourself. You couldn't just score off of an opponent's serve. That's basically old school volleyball history lesson 101. Back to Cathedral Catholic. They play Lakewood. They're the number 1 seed, so they get home court advantage throughout the entire CIF State Southern Section playoffs up until the state playoffs where they have to play the NorCal school, but more on that later. And I already mentioned that Sierra Canyon plays Marymount, and then Miracosta plays Newport Harbor. Now, the 4 versus 5 seed is Mater Dei, the number 4 seed, taking on Torrey Pines, the number 5 seed. So, obviously, Mater Dei had themselves, I wouldn't say a bad run in the CIF Southern Section playoffs, but I'm going to say that I think they, too, left a little bit of meat on the bone. But Miracosta is just that good, and Mater Dei basically played them as best as they could. But now they have a week off to prepare and get back on track, as basically they are playing Torrey Pines. The two have actually not played each other this season, surprisingly enough. And I thought they would have met in a tournament, but unfortunately for them, well, not unfortunately for them, they haven't met in a tournament. But now this time around, they are facing one another in the CIF State playoffs, and it's sure to be an instant classic. It's always a great matchup when Mater Dei and Torrey Pines lock horns with one another, and I think it could go either way between those two teams. So that's pretty much that for the CIF State Open Division bracket. Also got to acknowledge my boy Larry B in the chat room. He says, Teran has returned. I have indeed returned, good sir. And I appreciate you popping into the chat room, buddy. So also, To pretty much wrap up the CIF Southern Section girls volleyball, or the high school girls volleyball portion of the show, I gotta give a tip of the cap to Jake Nuneviller, former set point guest, as his Marina Vikings girls volleyball team came oh so close to winning the CIF Southern Section Division 5 girls volleyball championship. Unfortunately, they fell short as they lost to Buckley of Sherman Oaks in straight sets, which I feel bad for Jake. Marina hadn't even lost a set going into that final, and then unfortunately they just ran into a red-hot Buckley team, and you can't fault Marina. Obviously, Marina had been battle-tested all over the place, playing in tournaments that featured some fairly decent teams with out of in upper divisions, and then their conference and league had some pretty darn good teams that they faced, which got them battle ready for the CIF playoffs. But I have to give credit to Jake Nuneviller. His team managed to take a team that barely was able to get into the playoffs. They took down the number 1 seed Quartz Hill en route to making it to the semifinals, which they won that in straight sets. En route to making it to the finals, which they wound up unfortunately losing to Buckley. But it was their first finals appearance since 2002, so the fact that Jake Nuneviller was able to do that is quite astounding. Unfortunately, it resulted in them falling in the final, but hey, not many teams could say that they barely got into the playoffs and they made it all the way to the CIF finals. That's just impressive from Jake Nuneviller. This is his last season with Marina, as after this season he's going to be fully focusing on being the head coach of Mater Dei's boys volleyball team, as he actually is a teacher at Mater Dei High School. So overall for Jake, again, tip of the cap to him. Marina girls volleyball continues their season as they are in the state playoffs. They're in Division 3. For purposes of, I don't want to go too long on this high school girls volleyball segment, I'm just gonna limit it to them having the number 6 seed, and then they play the 11 seed in the first round tonight. And then another set point guest, Craig Pizzanti, he and Huntington Beach's girls volleyball team are also in the CIF state tournament. They're the number 3 seed, and they are in Division 1. So I'm going to try and support the former set point guests, just because we got to show them love. So that's basically that for all of the high school girls volleyball portion of the show. I will just close it out with this. I really am, if Cathedral Catholic does make it all the way to the state finals, a team that I think they could possibly play is St. Francis of Mountain View. That team has not lost all season, and they're amongst one of the top teams in California overall. And if St. Francis of Mountain View takes on Cathedral Catholic, oh boy, that could basically decide the national championship. If not, obviously it's going to decide the state championship, but it's going to decide the national championship, just because Cathedral Catholic is pretty much on top when it comes to pretty much everything. Like, again, they have not lost a set all season long. And St. Francis of Mountain View, I say of Mountain View just because Wednesday, they're actually playing another team named St. Francis, which I think is pretty funny. But St. Francis of Mountain View, they have not lost a match all season. They did recently go 5 with Archbishop Mitty, the complete juggernaut of CIF NorCal girls volleyball, but overall, I think St. Francis of Mountain View, that's a very good team, and I'm interested to see how they do come the state playoffs. Their path to the state playoffs begins tomorrow, and I really can't wait to see what Cathedral Catholic does in the SoCal regionals and St. Francis of Mountain View does in the NorCal regionals. So now that's going to do it for the high school girls volleyball portion of the show. Let's recap the NCAA women's volleyball week 11. So again, as the title states, it was a quiet week last week in week 11. There are only 2 upsets. One was a big upset, while the other was kind of expected. So the first upset comes from the Pac-12. We had Oregon, number 16 Oregon, taking on Washington. So I basically said if Oregon does not win this matchup, I don't know if they should have the right to hosting a regional playoff or of being nationally seeded in the NCAA tournament, just because they've had some close calls. They had that one loss to USC. They also lost to Washington State. But they really proved themselves against... Well, actually, no. Oregon was number 16, while Washington was number 19. I forgot. Washington lost to Arizona State. Oof. But Oregon was able to sweep away Washington, and they did so in dominating fashion. I did not know this, but Oregon is undefeated this year at home. That is what makes Oregon super tough. They're very good at home. And they just took Washington to the shed. They won the first set 25-13. They had no trouble winning that. Second set, it was a little closer, but Oregon won that one 25-19. And then the third set, Oregon wound up winning 25-18. Not as close as the second set, but it wasn't as blowout-y as the first set. Some numbers that pop out to me. Oregon hit 402 in the match compared to Washington's 152. Oregon was led by Mimi Collier, who had 14 kills. She hit 310. Gloria Mutiri had 11 kills with a hitting percentage of 280. Brooke Nuneviller, ironically enough, Jake's sister, well, not ironically enough, but Brooke Nuneviller had 10 kills. She hit 421. And this was the big number right here. Kiari Roby had 9 kills, but she had no hitting errors, and she had 9 attempts. So she had a perfect 1,000, which was downright impressive. Like I said, Oregon hit 402. They outdug Washington 43-28, which I thought was big time right there. And they outblocked Oregon 5-3, which isn't too bad, which wasn't too big, but basically Oregon was better defensively. In terms of serves, Oregon had a service error ratio of 3-6. They had 3 aces to 6 errors, while Washington had 2 service aces to 7 service errors. As for Washington, they were led by Maren Grote, who had 10 kills. Claire Hoffman added 28 kills. Or, I'm sorry, why did I say 28? She added 8 kills, and that was pretty much that. I don't know how much Washington misses Maddie Ensley, but they miss her quite a bit if they're having this type of effort. I would think Washington would have had a better surge in terms of this matchup right here, just because it would have been crucial for Pac-12 purposes. I think it's safe to say that Stanford is going to win the entire Pac-12, just because Stanford has been steamrolling their opponents. And, okay, well, I wouldn't say steamrolling, just because a couple weeks ago last week they had to go 5 with Washington, but they basically rolled past Colorado, and then they got past Utah as well, and basically they're inching closer to winning that Pac-12 championship in the Pac-12 championship, and it's not surprising to see them do well. I knew they would pretty much win the conference. I called them winning the conference early in the season. This week, Stanford has the SoCal schools, USC on Wednesday and UCLA on Saturday. I'm just going to ask this. I dislike how Stanford and USC had to move that matchup from originally Thursday all the way to Wednesday. It really broke my heart just because I have lots of things going on Wednesday. Why couldn't they just keep it? Ugh. I presume it might have something to do with like USC men's hoops, or USC plays Alabama State in the Pac-12 SWAC Legacy Series. So, thanks USC men's hoops. We'll talk about them on Friday. But, yeah, that's basically how USC and Stanford had to move their game from Thursday all the way back to Wednesday. Back to Stanford, though. Yeah, they're 2 games ahead of the entire pack. The only way Stanford loses is if they lose on this road trip, and then they lose to the Arizona schools, and then they lose to, I forget who they're playing in their second to last matchup of the season. Oh, they lose to Oregon State, and then they lose to Cal. After this weekend, it's their final road trip of the season. So after this, they basically have every match at home, which they're playing the Arizona schools next week. That shouldn't be too much of a problem, though. Arizona, I think, went 5 with USC, and then Arizona State kind of gave USC and UCLA some problems. And then they have Oregon State, which I know they beat Colorado, but they haven't really posted anything else bigger than that. And then Cal, I hate to say this, but Cal, unfortunately, has not won a match this season. And it looks like they're not going to win a match this season, just because they had a chance to win their first match of this season, or not win a match this season, their first Pac-12 match this season. They almost won their first Pac-12 match for the first time since, I want to say it was like 2018. But unfortunately, they just could not close the door on Utah. They were up 2-0, and then unfortunately they wound up falling apart, and they wound up losing the third, fourth, and fifth set in dominating fashion. But then again, that is Utah right there. For me, I think Utah is just vastly underrated, and again, I think that is a team that should get into the NCAA tournament. They have that potential. I just think that the beginning of their schedule did not do them any justice, but they have that win over Washington. They have the win over USC when they were ranked. So I would not be surprised if what's their face, Utah got into the NCAA tournament. I think they have that potential. And just as a correction, Cal actually did win a match. Cal actually did win a match in women's volleyball. They actually beat Stanford of all teams. They beat Stanford in 5 sets back in the COVID season, so that's kind of my mistake. So my apologies right there, everybody. But yeah, Cal has seen better days in terms of women's volleyball. But yeah, hopefully Cal does somehow win a match this season. I wouldn't say it's possible, just because based on their schedule, they have some toughies when it comes to facing some big time competition, as they've got the SoCal schools just like Stanford. They've also got the Arizona schools. They've got Oregon, which, oh boy, that's going to be a tough one. And then they close out the season against Stanford. So we'll see what happens with Cal, but it's just tough times for Cal women's volleyball. And then jumping over into the second upset, and this is my team of the week right here. We had Miami, yes, the U, taking down number 10 Georgia Tech in 4 sets. So the first set, it was close for the most part until Georgia Tech managed to break free, and they managed to win the first set 25-18. But then Miami won the second, third, and fourth set by scores of 25-22 in different fashion. The second and fourth sets were fairly close, or were pretty much close for the most part. And then Miami was just able to just pull away from Georgia Tech late in the set. And then the third set, Miami, I wouldn't say they cruised past Georgia Tech. Obviously, Georgia Tech was on their coattails for the most part, but Georgia Tech, they just could not answer the call after that first set. Miami was led by Flor Marie Heredia Colon, who had 18 kills. She hit 343, which was not bad at all. Angela Grieve had 15 kills, but this number is ugly. She had 16 hitting errors as opposed to her 15 kills, and she hit negative 18. Ugh. And then Janice Lau had 13 kills, and she hit 333. As a team, Miami hit 172. Their best hitting percentage came in set number 2, which I thought was basically the tipping point after that atrocious first set. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, hit 189. Their best hitting percentage came in the first set. The fifth set wasn't overly bad, but unfortunately for them, Miami just had a little bit too much heat within their big-time hitters. Savannah Vach had 45 assists, and leading them in the dig department was Alanis Vieira, who had 14 digs. Yaidalis, Rosado, and Grieve each had 12 digs. And as a team, Miami got outdone in a majority of the stats, except for digs. In terms of digs, Miami outdug Georgia Tech 62-55. Georgia Tech outblocked Miami 14.5 to 8.5. Miami got out-aced 6-5, but they had fewer service errors. They actually had a perfect service-ace service error ratio of 5-5. As for Georgia Tech, they were led by Julia Bergman, a.k.a. Lava Girl, a.k.a. the potential ACC Player of the Year candidate, a.k.a. the potential Player of the Year candidate overall. As she had 16 kills, she only hit 140, which, it wasn't bad, but it's like, she can't carry the team. Georgia Tech can only go as far as their hitters go, especially Bergman. If she's having to carry the team majority of the season, it's not going to be a recipe for success. Tamara Oteen had 10 kills, while Breland Morissette and Bianca Bertolino each had 9 kills. In terms of digs, they're led by Paula Pimentel, who had 23 digs, and then Julia Bergman chipped in 10 digs. So, Georgia Tech had the stats. It's just that they just could not pull out the clutch points later in the set, which I find a little saddening, but it is what it is. The loss does hurt them in terms of they're probably not going to win the ACC. And the loss also hurts them just because this was the first match in 31 ACC matches that a ranked team from the ACC lost to another ranked team from the ACC. So prior to the first 30 matches, no ranked ACC team had lost until Georgia Tech lost to Miami. Now, Miami is actually a fairly good team. They actually have played some teams close, like Oregon. They just don't have the big breakout wins to stamp them in as an official NCAA tournament team. But I think this win definitely benefits them. They're in 4th place of the ACC, if that means anything. Like, the three-headed monster of the ACC is clearly Pitt, Louisville, and Georgia Tech. Miami, I think, makes a good case of being a 4th head, and I think Miami definitely deserves to be in the NCAA tournament. I think they have some fairly decent wins. They don't have too many bad losses. I think Miami is a good team. I don't think they're a great team. I mean, they don't have the same story as they did last year, but I really think they have that potential. And they also followed up this win with a 5-set win over Clemson. Speaking of 5-set wins in the ACC on Sunday, Georgia Tech nearly had a meltdown against Florida State this past Sunday. Fortunately for them, they denied Florida State's chances of ordering the upset special on Sunday as they wound up reverse sweeping Florida State. Now, I thought that was a very good win for Georgia Tech. They fell behind early in the 5th set, but then they were able to key the turnaround as Julia Bergman did Julia Bergman things. But I really think Georgia Tech goes as far as Julia Bergman goes in terms of her nights, in terms of her kills. But it's not like last year where Georgia Tech had Mariana Brambilla and Julia Bergman. I just think that Julia just has such a great arm, and she has great athleticism overall. And I really think she's going to do great things in her professional careers. But we'll see. So that's pretty much that for the recap of the Week 11 upsets. Yeah, we only had 2. In terms of the stat stuffers, we might as well get this out of the way before we head to the first commercial break. We had Morgan Chacon of Long Beach State surpassing 1,000 kills on last Tuesday against Cal State Fullerton. Remember, Chacon actually transferred from Florida State, so she had a majority of those kills with the Seminoles. And then, not this past weekend, but the previous weekend, we had Shannon Crenshaw surpassing 1,000 digs against Cal/Stanford. We also had Diana Brown of Illinois surpassing 4,000 assists last Thursday against Wisconsin. which I thought was darn right impressive. Hannah Grant of Michigan surpassed 1,000 digs last Friday again at Minnesota. Jaden Newsom of Iowa State surpassed 2,000 assists last Friday against Kansas State. Paige Johnstone of California Baptist. Guys, remember, people, it's either say CBU or California Baptist. No Cal Baptist, but California Baptist. Paige Johnstone of California Baptist surpassed 1,000 digs last Friday against Utah Tech. Morgan Fingal of Tennessee surpassed 1,000 kills last Saturday against LSU. Emily Londot surpassed 1,000 kills last Saturday against Michigan State. And Iko Jones of Louisville surpassed 1,000 kills this past Sunday against North Carolina. That's basically all your stat stuffers that I basically go over. I wouldn't call them really stat stuffers, but it's basically like milestone alerts. But I don't really have too many stat stuffers for you all this time around. Not any like mind-blowing stats other than the whole Miami became the first unranked ACC team to beat an ACC-ranked team this season out of 31 matches, which I thought was darn right impressive. So for me, I really got to tip Miami. That's why they are my team of the week. If they did not achieve that feat first, Oregon would have been my team of the week, because them beating Washington State and Washington is no easy feat. But overall, for everything, that is pretty much it for the entire NCAA Women's Volleyball Week 11. I guess I should throw in some Big West Conference talk right there. I mentioned Long Beach State as they beat Cal State Fullerton, or when they played Cal State Fullerton. They beat Cal State Fullerton last Tuesday, but then they kind of ran into a buzzsaw against Hawaii this past Friday. The first set looked really good. Long Beach State actually had set point at 24-23, but you can never count out Hawaii as they wound up rattling off the next 3 points to win the set. And that was the big turning point right there. If Long Beach State wins that first set, it's a whole different perspective, but I really thought that was kind of the turning point. If Long Beach State should have taken that first set, they had their chances, but unfortunately, they just could not close the door on Hawaii. And again, it's so tough to beat Hawaii at Stan Sheriff Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. I just think it's a very tough place to win at, and it's a very loud gym, and it's very tough. It's a very tough gymnasium to win at. Lots of teams that aren't used to Hawaii time and not used to playing in front of a packed crowd will often get intimidated. Speaking of teams that were tough to beat at home, Cal Poly, surprisingly enough, they actually were handed their first home loss of the season as they lost to UC Santa Barbara in straight sets. Now, Santa Barbara has had a very difficult time in Big West Conference play beating teams on the road. They lost to Long Beach State in 4 sets back in the first half of conference play, and then to close off the first half of conference play, UC Santa Barbara lost at Hawaii in 4 sets as well. So for Santa Barbara to win that matchup, it's huge for them, just because it keeps them 1 game back of Hawaii. And for people that are saying Hawaii's got the Big West Conference on lock, I would not say that just yet. Remember, Hawaii's got to travel to take on UC Irvine, which another team that lost at home against UC Davis, which I was very surprised. I saw that their loss record their home record had 2 losses. I was very surprised to see that, if I'm being really honest with y'all. But Davis has actually beat UC Irvine twice this season, so I'm not overly surprised, but I kind of am a little. So back to Santa Barbara, them sweeping Cal Poly was probably their biggest win of the season. As again, they're only 1 game back of Hawaii. If they get hot as of late, and then if Hawaii stumbles, that last matchup of the season between Santa Barbara and Hawaii, that could basically be for which team gets to make the NCAA tournament, and which team unfortunately gets left out. I imagine Hawaii should be in the NCAA tournament. Their resume definitely looks good enough to be in the tournament. Obviously, a majority of their wins are conference wins. But for me, I think winning the Big West is the cherry on top. They have a better chance of making it as an at-large as opposed to Santa Barbara making it as an at-large. But overall, that's basically that for the Big West Conference. And that's basically going to do it for Week 11 of the NCAA women's volleyball season. When we come back, we'll take a quick commercial, but when we come back, I will discuss Week 12 of the NCAA women's volleyball season, and then I'll send you all on your way. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all of that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, such as The Show That Never Sleeps with Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss. They talk things all New York sports. And also the drop we just heard, that is Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson. Normally, Set Point goes on Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, but because of me being on vacation this past Monday, I had to move Set Point to. I basically had to move it to Tuesday as of this live recording, and basically, I had to record it on this day. So after this show, if you're listening live at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern, we have the Buffalo Huddle with Patty Bax, and then after that, an hour after that, we have Philly Sports Talk with Bobby Cash and Chris Amos. And then an hour after that, we have The Neutral Zone with Adam Karnick. And then after that, we have Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson. So if you're listening live on IE Sports Radio via Spreaker, you basically are getting a full 4 hours of amazing shows. Definitely do check out all of our amazing shows. We have lots of shows for major sports regions, cities, and sports in general, such as Set Point. Now, without any further delay, let's get on into the second half of this show. So, basically, we've ran through a majority of everything, as we basically ran through all of Week 11, except we didn't go through the AVCA Coaches Poll. So, the Coaches Poll this week, this was released yesterday at noon Pacific time. So 25 to 21 consists of Washington State at 25, UCF at 24, Houston at 23, Western Kentucky at 22, and Rice at 21. 20 through 16 consists of Washington at 20, Kentucky at 19, BYU at 18, Marquette at 17, and Penn State at 16. 15 through 11 consists of Purdue at 15, Oregon at 14, Georgia Tech at 13, Creighton at 12, and Florida at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Baylor at 10, Minnesota at 9, Stanford at 8, Pitt at 7, and Ohio State at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Louisville at 5, Nebraska at 4, Wisconsin at 3, San Diego at 2, and your still number one team in the AVCA Division I Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll for the second straight week is Texas. So, for me, this is no surprise to see Texas at number one. I forgot to mention, and I am so sorry, I kind of forgot to mention this in my week of upsets. Iowa State lost to Kansas State this past Friday. So this was actually the second time that Iowa State lost to the Wildcats. Now, normally I would say this is an upset, but this isn't actually a big-time upset, just because Kansas State had the number of Iowa State this season. So, unfortunately for the Cyclones, they were on the short end of the stick, and that loss is crucial because not only did Iowa State fall out of the top 25, they're still receiving votes, though, but they fell 2 games back of Texas in the Big 12 conference race, and that's actually going to be perfect segue to go into my Week 12 matchups to watch for. So this week we have, unlike last week, we have a lot more ranked-on-ranked matchups. We have 5 ranked-on-ranked matchups, which is going to be quite the barn burner week, unlike last week. Not saying that last week was bad or anything, but I just thought that it just didn't have that big matchup to watch for. Like, the best matchup in terms of all the matchups last week was Washington at Oregon, which obviously went Oregon's way because they are super strong at Matthew Knight Arena. But for this week, in terms of Week 12, we'll start with the sneaky good matchup. So, right off the bat, we'll go with the matchup I've basically been harping about. Iowa State receiving votes, taking on number 1 Texas at Texas. So here's the thing. Texas obviously lost to Iowa State. I think this time the Longhorns are going to be much better around. If Iowa State could not even get past, Kansas State, I don't think they have a good shot against Texas at Texas. I don't want to say Iowa State looked ahead, but I feel that might have been the case. Unless Iowa State has the same game plan of beating Texas like they did the first time around, I think Texas will win this one. I'm not trying to say that Iowa State isn't any good, but Texas, I think, is going to come in with a little revenge on their minds, and they're going to prove to everyone that that loss against Iowa State the first time around at Iowa State, was kind of nothing. I wouldn't say a fluke, but I think it was just a blip on the radar. Also, in terms of sneaky good matchups, we have number 8 Stanford at USC. This is also another Wednesday matchup. So for me, USC is kind of the best opponent that Stanford has remaining. Them and UCLA both, which is kind of sad just because that's how far ahead Stanford is ahead of the Pac-12. They don't get to play Oregon anymore. They already played them this year. Oregon won that one. But for Stanford, if they get past USC, if they get past this weekend, they should be fine going forward the rest of the way. My thing is for Stanford is there is a danger to not having too many problems in Pac-12 conference play because you're just breezing through opponents and you're not getting battle tested. This is kind of their best matchup to have remaining on their schedule, because like I said, next week they've got the Arizona schools, and they've got Oregon State, and then they've got Cal. So for me, I think this is kind of their last iron sharpens iron matchup. This would also be important for USC as well, because if they somehow win, then that definitely puts them out of luck to win, or not to win, to make the NCAA tournament. Here's the problem for USC. They've lost too many times to Stanford in a row. They've lost 10 straight times to Stanford. I want to say it's like 10, if not 11. And then also for USC, they got utterly decimated the first go-around. They didn't even cross 20 points. They were lucky to cross 16 points in that first matchup against Stanford. And that was a first-place battle. It seems like USC is just not the same team as they were back when they faced Stanford. I don't know if they're missing some players, but ever since that loss to Stanford, they lost to the Rocky Mountain schools on the road. And then they I wouldn't say they narrowly escaped. They had to squeak by Arizona State, and then Arizona they had to go 5 with, which I don't think that screams NCAA tournament team. But I think I'm confident in USC. I'm more confident in SC this year than I was last year of them, especially since they beat Oregon. That, I think, is going to be their golden ticket to making it into the NCAA tournament. Because last year, they finished 500, but they only had one quality win, which was against UCLA being on the last match of the season, of the regular season. So, for USC, it's kind of, I want to see them actually doing well. And I might actually attend their matchup as, again, I wish they had not changed their matchup from Thursday to Wednesday, because that basically punches a hole in my plans. But I will be in the Los Angeles area tomorrow, as I'll be at Manhattan Beach for the Mirror Coast and Newport Harbor matchup, and then hopefully, and this is a big hopefully USC and UCLA are still playing by the time we get to seeing them, by the time my matchup is done with. So also in terms of the sneaky good category, we have Hawaii at UC Irvine. So I just got through talking about the Big West, and I know everyone's probably rolling their eyes and saying, oh my god, why is this guy talking more Big West garbage? Okay, not garbage, but you get the point. So, for Hawaii, this is kind of a trap game right here. Everyone's probably thinking, well, UC Irvine couldn't even beat UC Davis. They should beat Hawaii with ease. UC Irvine has only lost twice at home this season. Once to Santa Barbara, which they probably should not have lost, and then the other to Davis, which kind of had their number this season. For Hawaii, here's the thing. I really think they could win this one. On paper, they could win this one. But they have to go from Hawaii to Irvine, and I would not be surprised if Irvine pushed Hawaii to at least a fourth set. I really think UC Irvine has some darn good players like Joy Ume and Oni Ofobu and Campbell Jensen, but Hawaii I just think is too stacked. But for UC Irvine, this is kind of their Super Bowl. They obviously know what's at stake, and they're obviously pretty much out of the Big West Conference championship race. But if they do win this one, it would be a marquee win. They have beaten Hawaii in the past under the watchful eye of Ashley Hayne. So I would not be surprised if Hawaii beat UC Irvine, or if UC Irvine somehow toppled Hawaii. But that's a big somehow, just because Irvine, they've been a good home team. I'll give them that much. However, I really think Irvine could have their work cut out for them, especially since Hawaii knows how crucial this is going forward, just because their schedule isn't going to really let up, and they've got a good number of California matches. And this will also test Hawaii if they can win at a tough place to play at. They were able to do so against Long Beach State, but that was when Long Beach was just having lots of problems. And then they also lost to Cal Poly, and they also had to go 5 with Bakersfield. So, yeah, this is kind of Hawaii's big test. And then prior to that, they also have a matchup against UC San Diego. That could also, I wouldn't say fatigue them, but it could also be a matchup that could be, I wouldn't say trap game-ish, but I think it could be, this whole road trip this week could be Hawaii's make or break, because if they win both matchups against UC San Diego and UC Irvine, they're pretty much golden by the time they play UC Santa Barbara, barring they don't mess up along the way. But if for some odd reason they lose once, or heaven forbid twice, then that opens the door for Santa Barbara to becoming the Big West champion, and it could also leave the door open just a crack for Long Beach State and Cal Poly. Speaking of Long Beach State, perfect segue to go into the final sneaky good matchup. Long Beach State at UC Santa Barbara. So this matchup is important for Santa Barbara just because if they want to have any hope of winning the Big West Conference, they got to run the table, which would include beating Hawaii in the final match of the season. In order to do so, they have to beat Long Beach State, and Long Beach State got the better of them in the first matchup. Here's the thing for Santa Barbara. They struggle so much with playing at the Pyramid in Long Beach. This time, they're at Santa Barbara, they're at home. Long Beach State has their work cut out for them because Santa Barbara is a very tough place to play at. The bleachers are so close to the gym, to the court, and then it's not really like the equivalent of a small gymnasium, but again, that is just, it's fairly tough to win at. And Santa Barbara is a long trip for Long Beach State, especially since they have two matches this week. They have CSUN on Friday, the day before, and then they've got Santa Barbara on Saturday. For Long Beach State, I wouldn't say their hopes of making the NCAA tournament is done, but they'll have to run the table and get some help along the way. Their RPI is still fairly decent, though it might be dipping a little bit. I would have to check the RPI, which I'll probably do so a little bit later, but for Long Beach State, basically their RPI rests on probably Oregon and maybe LMU, just because those are their only two losses outside of conference play. Like, Long Beach State does have a decent resume, but again, not beating Oregon kind of hurts them. And then losing one match to LMU also kind of hurts them, especially since LMU isn't even ranked and they're in a non-Power 5 conference. So for Long Beach State, a lot's going to need to go their way in order to make the NCAA tournament. That's all the sneaky good matchups to watch for in Week 12. The notable matchups, we have two notable matchups. The first one starts on Friday as number 5 Louisville takes on number 13 Georgia Tech. So I was very close to putting this one in the definitely noteworthy category. But for me, Georgia Tech's loss kind of punched a hole in that. Here's my thing. I think Georgia Tech can still beat Louisville, but for me, the big question remains, is Anna DeBeer coming? Has Anna DeBeer returned for Louisville? If she's returned, then Georgia Tech is going to have their hands full, especially since it is against Louisville. Though them playing at Georgia Tech does make things a little bit more easier for them, but for Louisville, that's going to be one tough customer to try to take down, especially since they narrowly escaped against Florida State and they lost to Miami. So for Georgia Tech, they're going to have to play some darn good volleyball. It just can't be the Julia Bergman show. They got to have the other players step up, such as Bianca Bertolino and Tamara Oteen and Breland Morset. They got to have other players stepping up. They just can't not be a one-person show. And then for Louisville, it's basically, if they win, they're still in contention of winning the ACC. If they lose, then their path to the ACC championship gets very much tougher, especially if Pitt isn't struggling, which they haven't as of late. Also in the notable category on Saturday, the Louisville-Georgia Tech matchup was on Friday, by the way. On Saturday, we have number 16 Penn State at number 15 Purdue. So these are two teams that aren't going to be winning the Big Ten, but are looking to try to improve their odds of being seeded. It's looking like Oregon is going to be seeded unless, of course, they somehow stumble along the way, which basically begs the question for Penn State and Purdue. Of these two schools, which of these teams will not be seeded? I feel that honor might go to Penn State. I feel Penn State is still young, but so is Purdue. This is the battle of two young teams. Purdue is very young, while Penn State is also on the young and rebuilding side. But for me, Penn State is starting to figure it out ASAP. It's just that they got to figure it out a little bit sooner. So we'll see what happens with the Nittany Lions and the Boilermakers. I think this is going to be a great matchup right here. Again, the future looks bright for both of these teams. And for Penn State, I really think they have a good shot at winning this one, but here's my thing. It's just 50-50 on if they'll be able to host a regional tournament. And if they get the honor of being the 16th seed, then they'll have to be on the path of Texas, which could be interesting. Whereas if they're the 15th seed, like let's say Purdue is the 16th seed and Penn State is the 15th seed. If Penn State's the 15th seed, they'll probably be on the path of either San Diego or Nebraska, depending on what happens the rest of the way. But overall, for Penn State, this is an important matchup for them and Purdue. This could basically decide who gets to be seeded and who doesn't. Because remember, they're only 16 seeds. Now we get to jump over to the definitely noteworthy matchup. So we'll start on Thursday. Well, we got number 6 Ohio State at number 15 Purdue. Purdue has got quite the gauntlet this week. They have Ohio State on Thursday, and then they have Penn State on Saturday. This matchup against Ohio State, it's mega important for Ohio State. They are tied for first place with Nebraska and Wisconsin in the Big Ten. If they lose this matchup, and there's a reason why this matchup could possibly be a trap game. This could be a trap game, but if Ohio State does lose, then that endangers their chances of winning the Big Ten. They're obviously going to make the NCAA tournament, and their strength of schedule definitely shows for it. But winning the Big Ten is going to be much more tougher if they somehow lose to Purdue. And Purdue is not a bad team. They just kind of hit a rough patch just because of their just because they have such a young squad. But overall, I think this matchup is going to basically pit the veteran leadership of Ohio State against the young squad that is Purdue. And it's basically young head coach versus experienced head coach in Jen Flynn Oldenburg taking on Dave Shondell and his team. So I really think this is going to be quite the interesting matchup. And then also in the definitely noteworthy category, also on Thursday, by the way, we have number 21 Rice at number 22 Western Kentucky. Now, you're all probably thinking, well, why is this matchup more important than Louisville, Georgia Tech? Simple. Because these are the two best teams in the Conference USA, and both of these teams don't really get a chance to face one another in the regular season. They're either meeting one another they're pretty much just meeting one another in the Conference USA tournament finals. But now we get to see them in the regular season taking on one another. And if I'm not mistaken, both these teams are undefeated in conference play in the regular season. So whoever wins this basically gets the number 1 seed going into the up-and-coming tournament. As now I welcome Mike Pat in the chat room. Thank you for tuning in. He says, I hope you're having a great show. Appreciate that. But looking at the standings, Rice they're 12-0 compared to Western Kentucky's 13-0. I imagine Rice has a matchup they still need to play prior to that, and they do as they play Bowling Green. Oh no, they also play Western Kentucky. Or no. They play Western Kentucky, then they play Middle Tennessee, then they have the conference tournament. So they basically are playing Middle Tennessee. Western Kentucky, all they just have is this little matchup as they play Rice, and they also play FIU. They play FIU. Oh no, they already played. Yeah, they just have Rice. They have Rice this weekend, and then Rice has Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. So that's that for that little matchup, and I'm excited to see what Rice and Western Kentucky have in store for each other. And then lastly, the last matchup that's definitely noteworthy, and this is my match of the week. Number 4, Nebraska at number 6, Ohio State. Here's the reason why I think Ohio State at Purdue is a trap game for Ohio State. Because Sunday, they've got a big-time matchup against Nebraska. that basically decides on who could possibly be the top dog of the Big Ten and who's probably going to be second or third banana. Last time these two teams met, Nebraska won in 5 sets in Lincoln. This time around, Ohio State gets to be the home team, and this is big time for Ohio State. This is big time in terms of seeding as well. This could put, if Nebraska does manage to win this matchup, and if they get a little bit of help from beating Wisconsin along the way, they could move away from being on the path of Texas going into the NCAA tournament. However, if for some odd reason Nebraska loses, this might not be a bad thing for them. Unless, of course, they move down to the number 5 seed in terms of the NCAA tournament. But this has a lot of NCAA tournament implications going into this matchup. Just because this could make or... I wouldn't say it could make or break, but it could make or break a team's chances of winning the Big Ten Conference. Like, if Nebraska loses, then I wouldn't say it's their chances of winning the NCAA tournament, or not NCAA tournament, the Big Ten Conference is pretty much dead in the water, but I think that it's going to be a whole lot more tougher. Same could be said for Ohio State. But I think Nebraska just has a lot more of a loaded roster. Yes, they did have to go 5 with Northwestern, but for Nebraska, I think their roster is so much more loaded. I don't think they'll have too much trouble this following another loss. And unless, of course, they manage to lose to, heaven forbid, the worst team in their conference. But I don't think that's going to happen. For me, I think this is going to be a big-time matchup. The winner basically still stays tied atop the Big Ten Conference standings, while the loser basically has some catching up to do, and they have to hope that they get a little bit of help. Though I do see Nebraska and Ohio State making the NCAA tournament. It's just a matter of which team is going to be seated higher than the other team. And then soon we're going to be seeing Wisconsin taking on Ohio State, as I really am excited to see that Big Ten Conference race is going to come down to the wire, and I can't wait to see it. I really think Wisconsin has a great shot. Ohio State has a great shot. As I'm looking at this right now, Wisconsin plays Ohio State and Nebraska on the last week of the season. And they also have Penn State as well before that final week of the regular season. So overall, yeah, this Big Ten Conference race is going to come down to the wire here, and it's going to be very exciting to see what the Badgers, Buckeyes, and Huskers have in store for us. I think this is going to be a great Big Ten Conference race. And that is pretty much going to do it for my matchups to watch for this week. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Without any further delay, it is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. I appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Big shout out to the chat room, Larry B and Mike Pat for popping in. Really do appreciate you two coming through. I won't be at any volleyball matches this week as a member of the media. I might slip by Stanford USC as a fan, but I don't think I'm going to be covering any volleyball matches this weekend. Before we head off, I do gotta tell you all that Long Beach State and USC will be facing each other in men's volleyball in a fall matchup on Friday at Long Beach State. It's sure to be a barn burner. It's sure to be a great humdinger. Definitely do check it out if you're in the mood for some NCAA men's volleyball action. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action, whether it's high school, whether it's professional, whether it's college, whether it's beach. Definitely check out the volleyball action and enjoy it. I might see you all Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. I haven't decided on which day it's going to be on. Either way, have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you next week, if not later this week. Peace!